Welcome back to the studio, everybody. This is Bobby. On the bench today, I have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from LA Figures, and these are pretty radical statues. I am so happy to have them in my collection, and they look great on my shelf. If you've been searching for how to paint Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, then you are in the right place, because that's what I'm going to show you. Let's get into it. After extracting the boys from the ooze, I got all the parts washed and cured and separated into buckets. But first, a quick tip. Your 3D swords come out printed a little crooked. Well, it's an easy fix. All you need are some UV goggles, because we're not dummies, a UV flashlight, and a little bit of patience. So the idea here is, while the resin is still flexible, to bend it into the position that you want it to stay in, and using your UV torch to cure it and lock it into that position. I found it best to work from the base of the sword and move towards the tip, straightening and curing it as you go. As you can see here, it is much better. With both swords straightened out, I'm mounting these in a vertical position so that they can go back into the cure station for a couple minutes and finish baking. And that's that. Time to get to work. Welcome to my new sanding enclosure. I'm very excited about this thing. It's got a plexiglass front, so I don't have to worry about wearing PPE and goggles anymore. All the sanding dust is collected in the back through that fan. There's a little dust capture bag, so I can just blast away with my sanding pen now and my sandpaper, and I don't have to worry about making a big mess in the rest of my studio. So as you can see, I'm just kind of cleaning up some support marks. There really isn't a whole lot to do on these guys. They were pretty clean to print. I did have a few support marks under the chin and that kind of stuff, but for the most part, it was an easy sanding job on all these parts. I did have one misprint, and that was the Mouser model on Donatello's base. The first time he printed with a broken foot, and during the reprint, the foot printed okay, but the rest of the body was terrible. So I decided to amputate the good leg and merge it with the good body, and by the time I was done with it, you really couldn't tell, that anything had happened. So I just kind of roughed it up a little bit, attached it with some glue, and welded it with a little bit of resin, and then sanded it all down smooth, and it's like it never even happened. The next step was to mix up some plastic wood with a little bit of water to kind of thin it down, and just kind of work it into the little drain holes. Again, this model was great because there weren't really any gaps I needed to fill. All the keys fit together nicely, and the spaces were nice and hidden. So the only thing I really needed to do was patch up these drain holes and sand them all down. Now here's where I probably went a little wrong and made a poor choice. I wanted to work on these models, as a whole, so that I could get their skin tones, matching from top to bottom, but I permanently glued the legs and arms together, and in doing so I had to attach some weapons, Leo's swords and then Michelangelo's nunchucks, and it made it a little difficult to paint around. So I think in retrospect I would have done the hot glue attachment method so that I could spray them securely fastened, and then whenever I needed to separate them later, they're easy to separate. So learn from my mistakes, kids, and don't permanently glue your things together too soon. With that mistake made, we can move on to some priming. I use the Vallejo black primer as my go-to. It's a really nice product. Coats evenly and flattens out nicely, and just provides a really nice base for other paints to live on. Alright, let's get to some painting. So I'm starting with the Vallejo Metal Color Aluminum. on this mouser. I wanted the mouser to have a little bit more of a shine, a shiny undercoat than the other metal parts on the other bases, like the sewer lid on Raphael's base. I did that in a plate mail silver. That and the grate on Leo's base as well, just to give them more of a darker metal look. Next, I base coated the fire hydrant on Mikey's base in a Army Painter Vampire Red. This is probably my most favorite red. It looks totally different on black than it does on white, and you'll get to see that in a little while. So then I finished base coating the weapons and stuff with mahogany brown and a little bit of deck tan on the weapon wraps. So the next step was to give the turtles a bit of a zenithal highlight, mainly so I can see where the light's going to be hitting them, and to give some definition to all of their muscles. I painted the dirt on the model bases with a Army Painter Dirt Brown, just because that made the most sense to me. While I was waiting for those bases to dry, I decided to add the wash to the fire hydrant, just kind of giving it a nice coat all the way around and all over, making it really nice and dirty. And then after a quick dry, I gave it a dry brush of Army Painter Pure Red. I've found it to be a good idea to wet your bristles before you dry brush, so that it's not totally dry, and that will prevent the dry brush from looking kind of powdery and kind of chalky. Since this is metal, you really just want to kind of smoothly bring out those textures with the Pure Red. Next, I finished base coating the rest of the bases with the black pavement and the road stripes and the gray concrete and kind of mix of reds and browns for the bricks on Leonardo's base. And now my favorite part of the process, weathering. I love adding wash to stuff. I think it starts to bring out the textures, and you can really start to get a sense more of how the finished pieces are going to look. And the final step on the bases was to dry brush the tops with a little bit of ash gray, so it's not so flat black. It brings it a little bit of life. And after I was done, I was quite pleased with how my little piece of New York asphalt turned out. And it's turtle paint time. I started a base coat with Angel Green from Army Painter, mostly from the bottom up. I really like the kind of bluish green undertone that it gives them. And while I was mixing up a new cup of paint for Leonardo, tragedy struck. Oh, I was so mad at myself. Why? Why did I do that? But we're professionals, we're going to stay calm, and just glue the sword back on there. I'm so glad I worked so hard making it nice and straight. And wouldn't you know it, a few minutes later, it happens again. This time, I'm just going to finish painting, and we're going to attach it properly this time. I gave it a resin weld all the way around, and just made sure that I overcoated it a little bit, so the sword is not coming off again. To finish the skin tones, I used a Vallejo flat green for the mid, and for the highlight I used Army Painter Poisonous Cloud, just on the highest points of the model to really bring out the muscles and accentuate the features of the models. I was super happy with how the skin tone turned out, so I wanted to lock all that goodness in with a satin varnish from Army Painter. I like using the Army Painter varnishes because they dry really quickly, and it is important to seal your layers between applying colors. In case you make any mistakes, it comes off easily, and it's like a save point. So once I had my save point set in, I went around base coating the rest of the models with deck tan on the wraps and some brown sand on their toes and nails, And the leathers I did with a Army Painter leather brown. And for their chest pieces, I used a Vallejo yellow ochre. While I was in the middle of doing this, somebody told me on the chat that it is called a plastron, is the scientific name for a turtle chest. So there you go, plastron is the correct answer. We learned something today. I then went around the edges of their shells with a flat brown. I just wanted to get into the edges really good so that I could mask it off and paint the rest with the airbrush. And now for some masking. So I take a little bit of Plastitac and roll it into kind of a long piece, a long bead that I can run along the edges of where I want to mask. And I found that the Plastitac gives a much cleaner edge than masking tape, and it's a little easier to remove as well. With the tedious task of masking complete, I finished the shell painting with a flat brown from the airbrush. Once that had dried, I applied a generous coat of black wash to the shells. I wanted to give them a really dark and rich brown for the base. And to bring out the texture on their plastrons, I used a sepia wash. Did you hear how I just casually used my new word in a sentence? And with the washes dry, it was time to go back to my tiny airbrush box and apply a little bit of tan yellow to bring it back to life a little bit. Once I had that nicely covered, I used the sepia wash again, this time through the airbrush, down in the lower spots, in the shadowy areas, and to accentuate some of the other details. On the shells, I applied the yellow ochre. It was definitely one of those trust the process kind of moments, because it was looking a little crazy, in this early stage. I was kind of questioning what I was doing, but I'm happy with the final output. Once the yellow ochre had dried, I applied a sepia wash through the airbrush, kind of down in the crevices, and just kind of over the top of the yellow ochre to kind of blend it a little bit into the brown. And it turned out to be a really nice way to gradient from the yellows into the brown. Once I was happy with that, I applied a pin wash of black to the shells to give the sections of the shells a little more definition. Then I applied a gloss varnish to seal all that in, and after an unmasking, I could go about painting the leathery bits. Once that was done and dry, I used a black wash on all of the leathers and the knee pads and elbow pads. I used the sepia wash on the wraps and a black wash on the metal and the weapon wraps. I wanted to give the weapon wraps a little bit of a different look, to separate them from their body wraps. And once I dry brush these back up with deck tan, they're going to look really good. And that was the next thing I did. I started dry brushing their wraps with a deck tan. And for the leathers, I used a saddle brown on the knee pads and elbow pads. I wanted to give them a little more of a reddish tint to kind of help differentiate them from the leather belts and pouches and stuff. And those I gave a flat brown dry brush just on the highest points and the edges to kind of give them a little bit of a worn leather look. And I made sure to hit the inside edges with a little bit of a dry brush to give them a little bit of separation with the leather on leather. And then after that, I just finished base coating Leonardo's ropes and Raphael's mouth and teeth. And then I was ready to paint their masks. For Raphael, I used the Army Painter Vampire Red. You see what I was saying about how different it looks on white versus black? It's the perfect base red for Raphael. For Mikey, I used a Vallejo clear orange as the base. It was very pleasing to paint orange on the green skin. I really enjoyed it. Just felt right. And then for Donatello, I used a flat purple from Vallejo. And yeah, again, it was just the perfect purple. I was really happy with my color choices here. For the leader, Leonardo, I used a dark blue from Vallejo. I had to give him a couple coats because it was not going on as nicely as the others. But after 2 or 3 coats, it was perfect. And then I applied a wash to their masks, and I really just wanted to kind of give them some darkness and some age, and give them a little bit of a weathered look, and kind of accentuate the depths in the shadows and stuff. I made sure to hit all of their little mask ribbons as well, again, just to kind of bring out the texture in there. To finish off their masks, I used a little bit of Plasti-Tack to mask off around them, and dry brushed some brighter versions of the colors to kind of catch the edges of their masks and bring them back to life. And now for the final varnishing. I'm using these Vallejo premium varnishes, a matte, a satin, and a gloss. The matte I'm using on the wraps. The satin I'm using on their knee pads and elbow pads and stuff, and the leathers. And the gloss is for their toenails and fingernails and eyes and teeth. I really like the look of mixed varnishes. I think it adds like that little extra detail. And with that, we're ready for final assembly. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this making of video as much as I enjoyed making these turtles. If you made it this far, you probably like some of my other stuff, so make sure you check out my channel and my Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe so you'll be notified when I am online painting. I stream all of my paint sessions live, and you can jump in and join the fun. And until then, as always, take it easy.